With Jinhsi's arrival in the Wuthering Waves latest version 1.1 update, I'm sure a lot of you are dying to get your hands on the Dragon Girl, but more importantly, want to find out how you can maximize her potential. Hence in this video, I will cover important aspects including her kit, rotation, best teammates, echoes, and more. Let's dive right in. Jinhsi is a 5-star Spectral Broadblade user and she solidly claims the role of a main DPS with her kit. Starting with her basic attack, Jinhsi has a typical 4-part basic attack, but the key lies in how it interacts with her resonance skill. Her resonance skill has 4 different forms, yes you heard me right and let me explain. Her base form resonance skill makes her dash forward and deal spectral damage. However, an upgraded resonance skill, Overflowing Radiance, becomes available for 5 seconds after she does her basic attack 4 or intro skill in her ground form. This upgraded resonance skill not only does more damage but also sends her into her dragon form incarnation for 10 seconds. In this form, she gets access to yet another resonance skill, Crescent Divinity, which does pretty substantial damage, but what's more, she can transform once more by doing another 4 basic attacks in this incarnation form. Note here, the basic attack cycle will not reset, which means that there is certainly some potential for quick swap teams that can be explored. Either ways, the important thing here is the final transformation that happens after she finishes her basic attack 4, putting her in her Ordination Glow form. This form only lasts for 5 seconds, but this is where the magic happens and she gains access to another resonance skill which does more damage based on how many incandescent stacks she have on her. Speaking of the incandescent stacks, the number of stacks can be seen from Jinhsi's Forte circuit bar and it has a cap of 50. The stacks can be gained in 2 ways, first by dealing elemental damage and the second through coordinated attack damage. 1 stack is gained when anyone on the team deals elemental damage to an enemy, while 2 stacks is gained when a coordinated attack deals elemental damage to an enemy. Both of these generation methods have a 3 seconds cooldown, but this can be reduced to 1 second if Jinhsi casts her outro skill. Note here however, this cooldown is only shared between units of the same element within the same generation method. And more importantly, coordinated attacks will also count as normal elemental damage, which means 3 stacks at a time. I know this is very complicated, so I've created the following examples to help you understand this better. For our first example, assuming 3 seconds cooldown, if we have Jinhsi and Verena on the same team, Jinhsi will generate 1 stack for herself when she attacks with spectral damage. If we were to swap into Verena immediately and attack the enemy, no stack will be generated since they are of the same element and they are both doing normal spectral damage. However, if you were to cast ultimate on Verena and mark the enemy, then swap into Jinhsi to attack and triggering the coordinated attacks, Jinhsi will gain 3 stacks of incandescent, 1 from the normal spectral element damage and 2 from Verena's coordinated spectral damage. Conversely, for our second example, if you have Jinhsi on the team with Yinlin, dealing spectral damage on Jinhsi will trigger her 3 seconds cooldown on spectral element, but if you were to swap into Yinlin and deal electro damage immediately, she will also generate 1 stack of incandescent since they are of the different elements. Now if you were to trigger her sit down with invisible chair skill to upgrade the marks on the enemies and swap into Jinhsi to attack, Jinhsi will gain 4 stacks this time. 1 from normal spectral element damage, 1 from normal electro element damage, and 2 from coordinated electro damage. Now of course that's not all of the special new mechanics that Jinhsi brings with her. Upon casting her resonance skill Nuke, the Ordination Glow form will end and Jinhsi will gain this buff called Unison, which will be able to trigger once every 25 seconds. Now simply put, you can think of this Unison buff as a full concerto bar that she can use to trigger her outro skill. If she has this buff and full concerto energy, it will deplete the buff first and allow her to reduce her stacking cooldown from 3 seconds to 1 second, which really helps her since her rotation is relatively short, and having this Unison buff ensures she gets enough stacks for every single rotation. Lastly, we have her ultimate that does a pretty significant burst at a 1700% multiplier. For reference, our free-to-play God Havoc Rover's ultimate only has a 1500% multiplier. Of course, both of this pales in comparison to her 50 stacks resonance skill Nuke that is at a whopping 2700% multiplier at S0. As for her resonance chain, significant boosts lie in the S1, S3 and S6. S1 raises her resonance skill Nuke, Illuminous Epiphany, damage by 80%. S3 increases her attack by 50%, and S6 raises her Illuminous Epiphany damage multipliers again by 45%, but more importantly, her stack multiplier increases by a 45% per stack. At full stacks, this translates to a 3900% multiplier nuke, which is pretty bonkers. Of course, this does cost like $1,000 or something. Moving on next, I'll touch on Jinhsi's personal rotation, which is fairly straightforward. You want to either start with basic attacking 4 times, or ideally starting with her intro skill. Next, you want to ultimate and then use the echo before using your resonance skill to activate her incarnation mode. Then you want to skill once again before basic attacking 4 times to enter her final ordination glow form, and you end it off with another resonance skill that will activate the nuke into an outro once that is done. This will trigger her 1 second cooldown incandescent stacking to prepare her for the next rotation. Note here, the Echo and the Ultimate both have long cooldowns, 20 seconds and 24 seconds respectively, and her Ultimate in particular takes a lot of resonance energy to charge up. This means that you will only use her Echo and Ultimate once every 2 rotations. As for specific team rotations, it will depend on your team composition, but as much as possible, you always want to ensure full concerto before swapping back into Jinhsi so that you can trigger the intro skill and go directly into her enhanced resonance skill. Now that we know how Jinhsi works, we can form the following conclusions on how we can maximize her potential when it comes to team building strategy. The key to all of it is coordinated attack uses. Jinhsi's main damage comes from the resonance skill nuke in her ordination glow form, and this skill scales based on the number of incandescent stacks, which means that we want to, as much as possible, always cap it at 50 before we use her resonance skill nuke. Now, since coordinated attacks gain triple the amount of stacks for Jinhsi and shares the cooldown for the same elements, we want to have a team with different elements and team her up with units that bring coordinated attacks. Units like Yinlin, Mortar Fee, Baizhi, Yuanwu, and Verena all bring coordinated attacks in their kit, and the best team at the moment has to be the Jinhsi, Yinlin, and Verena team. Yinlin is the best partner for Jinhsi as she not only brings coordinated attacks with her marks, but also acts as a sub DPS, bringing substantial damage to the table. Meanwhile, Verena, despite being the same element as Jinhsi, is way too strong as a healer/support with her buffs, and also carries with her coordinated attacks that, as mentioned, does not share the same cooldown as Jinhsi's normal elemental damage, making her a prime sustain/support selection. If you did not pull for Yinlin or are planning to use Verena for other teams, say for the Tower of Adversity, you can definitely rock a team like Jinhsi, Mortar Fee or Yuanwu plus Baizhi as a sustain. This is also a great alternative as the team does carry coordinated attacks and also sustain while all being of different elements. Even better, if you have Baizhi at S4, you are able to generate 2 extra coordinated attacks, which is equivalent to 6 stacks. So this is actually preferable to Verena if you have issues with stack generation. A special mention here also goes to Taoti that does bring about a 38% resonance skill damage deepen that's actually pretty good considering how Jinhsi has all of her main burst lying in her resonance skill, which as mentioned stands at a ludicrous 2700% multiplier at max stacks. The only problem with Taoti, I would say, is the amount of field time she does require, but it might be a good thing to bring her along in the sub DPS/support slot if you have her built anyways. Next, we are going to touch on Jinhsi's Echo setup, and she does have a lot of things going for her, including the new Echo Jue that she wants to use as her active Echo. Jue is a summon Echo, which means that it will take no frames to use, which is usually preferred over the transform Echoes, and what's more, Jue also buffs Jinhsi's resonance skill damage by 16%, making him the perfect choice. With Jue locked up, this also implies that Jinhsi will utilize the 5-piece Spectral set. The preferred setup is of course the 4-3-3-1-1 setup with main stats as shown, but the 4-4-1-1-1 setup is now also possible with Jue's release since there are now 2 4-cost Echoes, with the other one being the Moaning X. Substat selection is also obvious with the crit rate and crit damage being favoured, followed by attack percent, flat attack and resonance skill damage bonuses. Before we go further on her weapon selection, let's first talk briefly on her skill priority. As you can see for yourself based on the damage composition calculations, Forte Circuit is the top priority, followed by the Resonance Liberation, then Resonance skill and Intro skill, and then lastly Basic Attack. Basic attack is now at 0% damage composition if you strictly follow the rotations, but of course in the overworld it should still be used somewhat, but please do not prioritize leveling it. Moving on next for her weapon selection, we can take a look at the damage comparisons I've calculated here. Her signature weapon is of course the best one, with not only the crit rate min stat and 12% damage bonus buff, but also a resonance skill buff at 48% that she can easily maintain 100% uptime on. Now if you have already put for Ziyan's weapon, you can also use it as a good stat stick with the crit damage and damage bonus buff, but the effect is not used at all, similar to the Lustrous Razor that acts strictly as a stat stick for the most part, with energy regen being quite useful as Jinhsi does require a lot of resonance energy as mentioned for her ultimate. Hopefully this guide has made you a Jinhsi pro, but just knowing how to play her is definitely not enough, which is why you want to check out this video over here where I touch on how you can min-max your echoes further to make your Jinhsi even stronger. I'll see you guys over there. This is Corky Gachas, signing off.